5.5. Disaffection. The First Continental Congress and American Identity. Learning objectives. By the end of this section, you will be able to describe the state of affairs between the colonies and the home government in 1774. Explain the purpose and results of the First Continental Congress.
Disaffection, the loss of affection toward the home government, had reached new levels by 1774. Many colonists viewed the intolerable acts as a turning point. They now felt they had to take action. The result was the First Continental Congress, a direct challenge to Lord North and British authority in the colonies. Still, it would be a mistake to assume there was a groundswell of support for separating from the British Empire and creating a new, independent nation. Strong ties still bound the empire together, and colonists did not agree about the proper response. Loyalists tended to be property holders, established residents who feared the loss of their property. To them, the protests seemed to promise nothing but mob rule, and the violence and disorder they provoked were shocking. On both sides of the Atlantic, opinions varied. After the passage of the Intolerable Acts in 1774, the Committees of Correspondence and the Sons of Liberty went straight to work, spreading warnings about how the acts would affect the liberty of all colonists, not just urban merchants and laborers. The Massachusetts Government Act had shut down the colonial government there, but resistance-minded colonists began meeting in extra-legal assemblies. One of these assemblies, the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, passed the Suffolk Resolves in September 1774, which laid out a plan of resistance to the Intolerable Acts. Meanwhile, the First Continental Congress was convening to discuss how to respond to the acts themselves. The First Continental Congress was made up of elected representatives of 12 of the 13 American colonies. Georgia's royal governor blocked the move to send representatives from that colony, an indication of the continued strength of the royal government despite the crisis. The representatives met in Philadelphia from September 5th through October 26, 1774, and at first they did not agree at all about the appropriate response to the intolerable acts. Joseph Galloway of Pennsylvania argued for a conciliatory approach. He proposed that an elected Grand Council in America, like the Parliament in Great Britain, should be paired with a royally appointed President General who would represent the authority of the Crown. More radical factions argued for a move toward separation from the Crown. In the end, Paul Revere rode from Massachusetts to Philadelphia with the Suffolk Resolves, which became the basis of the Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress. In the Declaration and Resolves, adopted on October 14th, the colonists demanded the repeal of all repressive acts passed since 1773 and agreed to a non-importation, non-exportation, and non-consumption pact against all British goods until the acts were repealed. In the Petition of Congress to the King on October 24th, the delegates adopted a further recommendation of the Suffolk Resolves and proposed that the colonies raise and regulate their own militias. The representatives at the First Continental Congress created a Continental Association to ensure that the full boycott was enforced across all the colonies. The Continental Association served as an umbrella group for colonial and local committees of observation and inspection. By taking these steps, the First Continental Congress established a governing network in opposition to royal authority. In the Declaration and Resolves and the Petition of Congress to the King, the delegates to the First Continental Congress refer to George III as Most Gracious Sovereign and to themselves as inhabitants of the English colonies in North America, or inhabitants of British America, indicating that they still considered themselves British subjects of the King, not American citizens. At the same time, however, they were slowly moving away from British authority, creating their own de facto government in the First Continental Congress. One of the provisions of the Congress was that it meet again in 1 year to mark its progress. The Congress was becoming an elected government.
Defining American. The first list of un-American activities. In her book, Toward a More Perfect Union, Virtue and the Formation of American Republics, historian Anne Fairfax Withington explores actions the delegates to the First Continental Congress took during the weeks they were together. Along with their efforts to bring about the repeal of the Intolerable Acts, the delegates also banned certain activities they believed would undermine their fight against what they saw as British corruption. In particular, the delegates prohibited horse races, cockfights, the theater, and elaborate funerals. The reasons for these prohibitions provide insight into the state of affairs in 1774. Both horse races and cockfights encouraged gambling, and, for the delegates, gambling threatened to prevent the unity of action and purpose they desired. In addition, cockfighting appeared immoral and corrupt because the roosters were fitted with razors and fought to the death. The ban on the theater aimed to do away with another corrupt British practice. Critics had long believed that theatrical performances drained money from working people. Moreover, they argued, theatergoers learned to lie and deceive from what they saw on stage. The delegates felt banning the theater would demonstrate their resolve to act honestly and without pretense in their fight against corruption. Finally, 18th-century mourning practices often required lavish spending on luxury items and even the employment of professional mourners who, for a price, would shed tears at the grave. Prohibiting these practices reflected the idea that luxury bred corruption, and the First Continental Congress wanted to demonstrate that the colonists would do without British vices. Congress emphasized the need to be frugal and self-sufficient when confronted with corruption. The First Continental Congress banned all 4 activities: horse races, cockfights, the theater, and elaborate funerals, and entrusted the Continental Association with enforcement. Rejecting what they saw as corruption coming from Great Britain, the delegates were also identifying themselves as standing apart from their British relatives. They cast themselves as virtuous defenders of liberty against a corrupt parliament.